everyone. It's David Swinowski from Rubble Soapstone Kits, and I'm here today to give you a little tutorial on the medium sea turtle. So in the kit for the medium sea turtle, we have that basic silhouette. You're going to get a rasp in that kit, as well as 3 pieces of sandpaper and some finishing oil in there as well. Now with the silhouette, one of the first things I like to do is actually draw or scribe the basic shape of my shell on the back of that turtle. So if you come in a little bit closer, just draw or scrape where we think that shell should be. And I like to try and keep that shell as big as possible. And then that way, if my shell is as big as possible, I only have to do minimal work on bringing those flippers down to help make that shell stick out. If you're really trying to be realistic with your turtle, Google Image is great. You can bring up 1,000 different pictures of a sea turtle, and that'll really help you be a little bit more realistic or natural with that shape. Now with the rasp, you're going to be going back and forth, almost like a sawing motion, right? It's going to create some dust. That's why I recommend using a bin of water. This will help trap all that dust that you're going to create when you're carving, pushing, scrubbing, carving that stone away. Make sure you have a good grip on your turtle. You'll notice I'm never working towards myself. I don't want to poke myself in the hand or run the risk of running a rasp across one of my knuckles. So to really make that shell pop out, the best thing we can do is to carve all 4 of those flippers, carve them down. We can work at the sides here if we wanted to, or even just angle your rasp. Because to just get rid of this stone doesn't need to be pretty right now. We just want to be effective. Using that rasp to chew through that stone. Once it starts getting really dusty, I'm going to rinse it off. Trap all that dust in that bucket. And go right back to it. So I've got a pretty good gap going in here. Now I'm going to carve down on the top side here. Trying to stay away from that shell, right? Just going to triangulate these two points. So instead of slowly scrubbing away all this rock, we're just going to create a chunk. We just snap right off. Okay. You can do that all 4 flippers to help save a little bit of time. Constant pressure, constant contact, scrubbing that rock away. If you're not seeing any dust, you're probably not being as effective as you could be. So you should see dust coming up pretty quickly, right? Once it builds up, it's going to start filling those teeth in your rasps. Make sure you rinse that off. Bring those teeth right back out so that your rasp stays effective and useful the whole time. Push, 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 push. Once it gets close, a little bit of pressure, snap that right off. It's okay if there's a little bit of a kind of like a rough edge here. We can actually finish that up here later on. So I'm not too worried about that right now. Push, push, push. You can also work from different angles, so you can work from one angle for a little while, turn it around, work from the other edge. You might actually find it easier to get rid of other flippers first to allow you better access. It's kind of blocking me getting at it from this angle, so I'll get rid of this bigger flipper first. Again, doing my best to stay off that shell, right? You want to try and make sure that your flippers are the same height. Once you actually get rid of those chunks, you can actually kind of take a look at it when you first start and just try and make sure that your scribing mark is as close to the other flipper as possible. If it's not perfect, that's okay. As long as it's nice and close. You don't want to make these front flippers too thin though, because if the flippers that you are leaving behind are too thin, they will be prone to breakage, because you saw me just snap those other chunks off, right? So we do want to leave a little bit of stone behind. Pretty close. Snap it off. I'm just going to pop the back flipper off. Now that that flipper isn't in my way up on the top here, I can really get to that back one right now. So to make that initial scribe, pushing, you're going to find is going to be the easiest way to get that line started. Once you have a nice defining line there, it stays on track a little bit easier. So now I can really push. Get rid of that one too. So now that we have all four of those flippers kind of knocked down a little bit, what we're going to do is get rid of those rougher edges around there, okay? So what we can do is just use the rasp to grind those down. And we just want to hold the general shape that we want for our shell right now. Okay, we don't want to carve into that shell pattern that we drew. Throw it away. Constant pressure, constant contact. Oh, starting to smooth that out, right? Pretty much just rasping until there's no edges there, no rough corners left on there. That's pretty much all I'm doing. So this side, not too bad. And I've still maintained that general shape of the shell. And I haven't really carved my flippers too narrow either. So I'll just kind of flatten the top of this flipper out. And because this flipper is a little bit thinner, I'm not going to push down too hard. I'm more just kind of running the rasp across the surface of it just to try to level out that edge, right? That's pretty much all I'm doing. And that's not too bad. I can handle that for now, so we can work on these other two flippers here now. Rinse your rasps out, get the dust out so they can work nice and effectively. We can still see some of the extra stone here from where we scribed that line earlier. So I want to make sure I'm getting rid of that excess on the outside. And this should help hold a little bit of symmetry in that shell. So this side seems to be a little bit narrower than the opposite side. So because we can't add any more stone here, we just need to remove a little bit more stone from this side just to kind of even it out. So you can always re-scribe your stone. So that you can try and visually get a little better line for you to see. Use that rasp, carving on the one side till that rasp kind of fills up. I'll just flip it over. Use the other side until it doesn't seem like it's working as well. Or if it gets too dusty, rinse it off. I'm also going to rinse out teeth on that rasp as well. Look at that shell. I'm looking for some symmetry. Still a little bit extra there, so just do a little bit more. Notice I'm using my thumb to help hold my rasp on that side edge of the shell. It's like a guide to help keep my tool from popping off the top, right? I don't want it to pop over. I just want to keep it along the edge of the shell itself. Try to stay in frame. Okay, so now that we have the general shell pattern, we've got all 4 flippers minimized, they're lowered down. Now we're going to think about the angles that we want to have on said flippers. So use those rasps, use that rasp, just kind of work on creating an angle, if you will, on those flippers. I'm also going to work on some symmetry, so I'm going to watch from the front, try and maybe level them up, or I could leave them a little bit lopsided if I want to, one way or the other. Kind of depends on you, what you really want to do. I'm going to even these two out a little bit. So as it's facing me, I can see the front leading edge of both of those flippers. I'm just going to try and do my best to match that up. If you wanted to, you could always use a ruler or a tape measure and then mark each one with an exact height so you know exactly where they would match up. I'm not too worried about it being exactly perfect. So I'll just go from my eye. Not bad. All right, I'm pretty happy with the level on the front flippers. So now I'm going to work on leveling the back ones. So we'll turn those towards me. Get an idea of what I'm going to do. I'm going to lower them a fair bit here. Because for me personally, my back flippers should be lower than my front ones, so I have a fair bit of material to remove from there. Check it from the side here so I can see a little better. It's getting pretty close. Could always use the rasp itself. Well, you know what? It's still a little bit higher. Still got a bit of a gap there, so I'm gonna keep lowering those flippers. Because the way it sits right now, those flippers would be flat on the ground. If you want to raise those flippers off the ground a little bit too, you could carve from underneath and bring that down a little bit as well, and that would actually bring the flippers off the ground, and then make sure you just have like a nice enough base here, almost like the same shell pattern that you had on the back, on the belly, for it to stand on, right? I don't carve for too long before I stop to take a look, see how far I've gotten. I don't want to go too far, right? Once we've gotten rid of that stone, it's not like you can add it back to that stone. So if you're trying to match something up symmetrically, it's probably better if you do a little bit of work, stop, and then double check it before just continuing and going too far. I think I'm pretty happy with this side. So now I'm going to try and match it up with the opposing side. Pretty close, pretty close. So as I was saying, if they're not perfectly aligned, that's okay, it's not that bad. As long as you're happy with it. So now, all right, I've got all 4 flippers lowered down. That shell is really nice and raised up. I'm going to work on the head a little bit right now. I'm going to actually bring the bottom up a little bit and also carve the top down a little bit. Try and center the head in between the body. You could still use your rasp to give you a few rough guideline marks so you can have a general idea of where you want that piece to be, and then you can see what bits you need to get rid of as well. Okay. Because this is a little bit shallower, I'm not going to worry about triangulating those 2 pieces. I'm just going to scrub them off here with the widest part of this rasp. For mine, the head's a little bit further over on this side than it is on this side, so I can actually narrow that head a little bit because there's that much stone there. You have some room to work with. scrubbing, stop and take a look at it. Not too bad. Maybe if I just round this edge off right here, might look a little better. Perfect. Using the rasp, just going to round this top part off as I continue. Scrubbing, constant pressure, constant contact, grinding that stone away. Push, push, push. And if you wanted to, you could also draw or scrape a line with your rasp where you want to carve your stone right down to. So if I'm going to make a line right about there, because I already brought the chin up a little bit, now I'm going to carve the top of the head down to kind of center that head on the body. And because those flippers are now a bit thinner than they were before, you want to really make sure you have a good grip and a good hold on your stone, because you don't want to accidentally drop it into your bucket. You will end up possibly breaking one of those flippers off of your carving, okay? If that should happen, just stop, let it dry, use a super glue, glue that flipper back on, let that cure, and continue carving. So I think one of the reasons that the sea turtle is one of our most popular shapes is the fact that you can put so many different patterns on this shell as well. It's really up to you. You get to be really unique and do your own design on that. I think that's a pretty big draw to the turtle itself. You could either simply dome it and round it, or put some stripes in there, or a hexagon pattern, or even just any pattern really for that matter that you want to. And I think that's a pretty big hit for this particular kit. Rinsing lots as I go, trapping all that dust inside the bucket. I enjoy carving. I don't like cleaning up big giant messes, so the more I'm using the water to trap all this dust, the less mess I really have to clean up at the end. So it's really beneficial for you to use that water. I try not to get too crazy when I'm scrubbing. I'll stop every once in a while, take a look at it from the side. Here's my original line. So once I start getting close to that, I'm going to stop, take a look at it, see if I still want to continue working it down, or maybe I want to work it up the other way to kind of center the head on that turtle's body. But I am going to work it down just a little bit more, just so I can get a little bit more of a lip on the back of the shell. You notice with my rasp, I am going back and forth. But you want to make sure you're not just going backwards. And the reason is with these rasps, the teeth are angled in a certain direction. So by pulling, it kind of tickles my finger, but it's not really that effective. But by pushing, you can really feel the teeth on these things trying to work and scrape away. So also make sure that you're using your tools effectively as well. Being very aware of where the point of my rasp is. I don't want to stick that into my fingers or my hand. So you do have to be aware of the tools that you're using. So I often say if I had a nickel for every single time I poked or scraped myself with a rasp, I'd have enough to buy the box of Band-Aids I needed when I poked myself with a rasp. Bring the chin up just a little bit more. So now I'm kind of moving the turtle around, looking for symmetry in the lines. You know, I want to make sure that I have a nice, even kind of a curve for the underside of the flippers. And I also try and even out the point of the nose and then the sides here as well. They don't always end up perfectly even when we're cutting them on a saw. But if you spend a little time with the rasps, it's definitely something you can do yourself, okay? Rinse, take a look, getting close, a little bit more. It's pretty close. It's pretty even. Like that. So now I'm going to check from the side. Just want to make sure I'm getting rid of any of the little edges. I want to make sure that it's a nice round transfer from the shell here. I want to make sure that I don't have any gaps or ridges or bumps sticking up from where the head was originally that I got rid of. Same thing with the flippers. I want to make sure that it's a smooth transition all the way around the shell, right? If you see any of those particular ridges, just try to make sure they're as small as possible. They don't have to be completely gone, because the sandpaper, when we do our finishing, will also help get rid of some of that as well. But it's definitely easier to do that with your rasp than it is to do that with your sandpaper. Okay. I've still got a fair bit of stone there for the head. What I might do here is actually make a little gap so that the turtle has his mouth open. Maybe grabbing a jellyfish or something. So use my rasp. Roughly the center here on the mouth. Just going to push to get that groove started. Once you make a couple pushes, it's going to give you that little groove in there. So now that's going to help hold my tool in place so I can be a little bit more aggressive and work back and forth. I'm also going to twist the stone or turn the stone to try and make it nice and even on both sides. If you want to, you can always just work on one side, turn the rock around, and then match it up on the other as well. Okay. Now I have the grooves on the sides here, almost as far back as I want. So I'm just going to get those to roughly where I want them for the corners of the mouth. And then once I do, I still have some material inside to get rid of, but it's a smaller area, so I'm actually going to hold my rasp more like a pen or a pencil using the fine tip of that rasp. Just to kind of bulldoze out a little extra material from inside the mouth. I find most sea turtles kind of have a similar to a parrot-like beak. So I might even carve up a little bit to the roof of the mouth while leaving the very tip alone, just to help give it that little extra curve at the end of the mouth there. Like that, I'm going to round off some of these square, rocky edges. Same on the bottom. Curve the jawline. If it's too dusty, I can't really see what I'm doing. And just make sure I rinse that off. Same with the tool. Make sure those teeth are out and effective. Take another look at it. Google Image is really great if you're looking to try and get some more realistic images of the head or the neck areas. I find online is really, really great for that. You can get 1,000 different pictures of anything you really want to carve, and then use the best images available to help you get the desired effect on your carving. I'm just going to hollow it underneath from the bottom part of the jaw here a little bit. And I'm working on smaller concentrated areas. I make sure I have a really good grip on both the soapstone itself and the tool that I'm using. But again, if you make a small mistake, don't worry about it. As long as you don't keep making that small mistake over and over again. Once we get to sanding, we can get rid of any little minor mishaps we made on our carving, okay? More just using the very point of this rasp to do the work in here now. Trying not to wedge my rasp in because I might accidentally angle it almost like a lever and break that jaw off. I'm always very careful near the end of my carvings when I'm getting close to finish, because that's when the most amount of breaks I find happen. Because I get excited, I'm almost done, I tend to rush. So just try and slow down. Remember, stone carving isn't a race, it's a process. Take your time. Stone will wait for you. Got a pretty good neck on there. Going for the jellies. Just gonna work on that corner of the mouth a little bit. And if you didn't want to make the mouth on that, that's fine too. You could just kind of round off the head, neck, even just drawing a line on the side where the mouth would be is also an option for you as well. Use the point here to kind of draw the hinge. I like being more realistic in my carving personally. Just going to make the bottom jaw a little bit narrower than the top, so the top of the head kind of sticks out a little bit, and the bottom jaw kind of sits inside. I'm trying to match it up. I'm going to look at this side closest to me. I'm going to cross just to try and match it up as best I can. So start lightly when you're drawing those lines, and then if they do match up, then you can continue so that those lines are a little bit more committed on the sculpture. So you can carve the details in. Rinse, take the hook. Not bad. Want a little bit more of a jawline from the top over top of the bottom. Definitely want some separation there, so just going to make that move a little deeper. You want to see where the bottom jaw kind of sits in, and then the top jaw kind of jets out a little bit. I'm going to try and match that up on the other side as well. I can even carve that bottom jaw backwards a little bit, just so that that top really looks like it hooks out over top of that bottom section, right? Curve the bottom of the neck in just a little bit, close to the body of the shell, just to help make that bottom jaw kind of stick out a little bit more. A little extra dimension to that. So the bottom jaw kind of juts out, grooving by the neck here, just to kind of give it that little bowl shape, if you will. Bottom jaw is a little bit further set back than the top. So now I think I can probably start thinking about the pattern on the shell. I'm pretty happy with the head and the neck. So you want to try and maybe think a little bit ahead as to what you might want to do here. If you wanted to put in any patterns, you can always draw them in lightly before you commit. So that way you're not stuck with that pattern in the shell. You could also maybe dome the shell a little bit prior to putting in your pattern. I think I'm going to put just some elongated stripes along the back here for this one today. But I know that I'm going to want the back of the shell to be lower down. So I'm going to leave the front of the shell a little bit higher than the back of the shell, but I will still bring it down a little bit. So I'm just going to get a good grip and just be really aggressive with my rasp. We're really pushing into that stone. Concentrating more towards the back. Again, once it gets really dusty, I'm just going to rinse that off, trap all that dust inside that bucket. And if you're noticing any symmetrical problems with your shell, now would also be the time to kind of work on those as well, right? More of a teardrop or pear shape, if you will. Looking from different angles, changing the angle of the stone so I can make sure I'm working right past those edges. Dust. Starting to work its way. Take a little bit of time, got a little bit of a ramp angle going there. If your hands get tired, just take a break. As I said before, the stone will wait for you. I'm also going to try and keep the center of the shell at the highest. Pardon me. Hi, Jack. Rounding off those corner edges as well. Checking the symmetry of my shell. Looking at doming that shell, right? Getting lower in the back, trying to keep the front up a bit higher, but also rounding off those sides as well, right? I feel like the shell's at a pretty good stage. I think I can start putting my pattern into it. So I said I wanted to kind of leave the center a little bit higher. So I'm going to put some grooves along the sides. So start lightly first. Don't worry if you go off track. As long as the grooves that you want to stay are the deepest, any of the little mistakes that you've made, we can erase with the first sandpaper once we start our finishing process. And I'm definitely going to make sure the pattern that I'm putting in here is deep enough because we still have the 3 layers of sandpaper to go through. And if our patterns aren't deep enough in our carving right now, sandpaper number 1 will actually completely erase them. So you want to make sure you've got a nice depth on those. Now I'm just trying to match up the shell pattern on the other side. That's it. You might find that holding your rasp like a pen or a pencil will help you kind of concentrate where it goes a little better. And by gripping it further back, I find I have more control over the dexterity of my grasp when I'm holding it really close to the very end. I'm just working on making those grooves nice and deep, because once I do my sanding and start to get rid of any of the deeper scratches that I don't want, I really want to make sure that my grooves are deep enough because I do not want to erase them. Work all the grooves right to the very ends on one side. I'm going to turn this turtle around. Make sure I do the same thing on the other side. Make sure to rinse as I go. I'm going to be able to see what I'm doing. Make sure you give those patterns of yours a good rinse. Take a look at them. Not too bad. Pretty happy with that. Just make sure I clean out all that dust. Add some final shaping to these flippers. Just going to bring them down just a little bit more. Kind of angle them on the sides, if you will. Making sure not to run into the patterns I put on the back. Check my angles from behind, making sure the symmetry is still working. Nice, liking that. Round off some of these square edges on the flippers right now. I'm not going to get too crazy with the details on the flippers. I don't want to make them too thin or they will be prone to breakage. You do need to leave a little bit of stone behind to maintain some integral strength in there. So you don't want to go too thin. There. Grooves here. Just add some texture there. Match up these other ones now. I'm just going to go around checking, looking for symmetry throughout your piece, checking your angles, making sure your grooves are deep enough. And I'm just kind of matching up the shape on the head. Bottom of the chin looks a little bulky to me, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit more. Got a nice little pattern on the back. Got some little texture patterns in the flippers, with the head minimized as well. Little jaw on there. I'm pretty happy. If you want to, you can sign your name on the bottom of your carving. Most artists do sign their work. But I think right now I am ready to start sanding this piece. Continuing with sandpaper number 1. Just getting rid of all the deeper scratches I don't want right now. For some of these tighter areas, I'll just open up and refold my sandpaper multiple times to make it smaller, but also a little bit thicker as well. Just doing the best I can to get rid of those gray lines. So that's typically what your deeper scratches are going to really stand out as a gray line. And if you scrub it till it's no longer gray, but whatever natural colors are going to be in that stone, kind of showing through, just scuffed, scratched lightly, more scuffed, I guess. That's good. Do a lot of rinsing when I'm sanding. If you want to see something clearly, just rinse it off a bunch of times. Pressing pretty lightly through here. I want to work up into the shell. We're looking at every flipper, every angle. Sometimes it looks a little different when you change the angle up. Just trying to be really, really thorough with sandpaper number 1. It is the most important out of all 3 steps for your finish. Because if you don't do a good job on sandpaper 1, sandpaper 2 is limited, and sandpaper 3 will be effectively harder to accomplish as well. I'm not going to go into the grooves, but I will just brighten that shell pattern up just a little bit. Get the dust out of those grooves. Just a little bit of a deep scratch across there for one of the mistakes I made earlier. Now's the time to get rid of it. Pretty good. It's a sea turtle, lives in the ocean. I think a few little marks here and there isn't going to hurt it. Just trying to be really, really thorough with sandpaper number 1, that's all. Because now that the sandpaper gets smoother, it's going to be harder to get rid of any blemishes or any marks that you don't want in that stone. pretty happy with it though. I think that's okay. I'm gonna stick with that. Now I'm gonna go to sandpaper 2. So sandpaper 1 I take out. Sandpaper 2, which is the 320 grit. Put that right in the water. Now when I go to sandpaper 2 and 3, I try not to scrub your stone on the bottom of your bucket because of sandpaper number 1. As you use this, you can see there's some blue paper sticking through. That's where the grit has fallen off. It's now in the bottom of the bucket. This grit is definitely harder than the stone we're carving. So we want to make sure we're not putting new scratches in our carving as we're trying to finish it. Some of you may want to change your water and just completely clean that water right out, refreshing it so that there are none of those little silicon carbide particles in there. And that's good too. We'll fold this sandpaper in half, just like the other one. Now with sandpaper number 2, we're going to get rid of all those scratches that we don't want. And it should start to really smooth out this stone. You should really notice the shine's kind of coming through. Getting rid of those scratches, the texture as well. Should be getting pretty smooth. And if you go to sandpaper number 2 and you start to smooth it out and you notice there's still a deeper scratch there, if you want to get rid of that, you can go back to sandpaper number 1, make that scratch smaller so that you can erase it with sandpaper number 2. And as I said with my turtle, it's been living in the ocean, so a couple little nicks here and there aren't going to bother him too much. You can fold that sandpaper up, manipulate it so you can tuck it into any of those corners or nooks and crannies that you need to get into to do a good job sanding. So we still have one more sandpaper after this. That's the 600 grit. It doesn't really get rid of any of these scratches, these smaller scratches that we've left behind with sandpaper number 1. So if you want all the scratches you can see to be gone, you should really take care of them with sandpapers number 1 and 2 before you move on to that third paper. And we're really going to start to see this color popping on the stone. Any of the natural patterns that are in this rock are going to be coming out right now. It's beautiful. Do my best, going around, try to be thorough. Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of pressure. Pretty much just keeping consistent contact of that sandpaper on the surface of the rock. Just moving it around there. Fold it up a couple times. Like the swirls on this flipper right here. You will see that natural color coming through. The only way to do it is to sand it out. Being really careful around this edge here. Into the flipper, really thin there. Making sure I have a good grip on my carving, but not too tight of a grip. Be a little gentler with that. Be putting scratches back in the bottom if I'm not careful. So I'm just looking around, looking for any scratches that I don't want, making sure any major blemishes on that stone are dealt with now. Because all the scratches I don't want to see should be gone before I go to stage 3. So the last one's just going to smooth this out. Should feel like glass when we're done. A couple nice little scrapes in there, a little texture in there. I like it. Just going to leave it. That one's a little bit deep. We'll get that one. That one I think is too deep. I'm going to go back to stage 1. There we go. Just a quick 1-2. And once I'm happy with sandpaper 2, go to the third and final stage. Last sandpaper, 600 grit, just to smooth this out one last time. And then with sandpaper 3, just being thorough. Just trying to make sure you go over everywhere as evenly as you did with sandpapers number 1 and number 2. Really is just a consistency thing for the sanding and the finishing. Should be pretty smooth. Same with sandpaper number 3. If you find you have just a tiny little scratch there, now it could be really standing out. Just go back to sandpaper number 2. Minimize that. And buff it right out. For larger surfaces, you can open that sandpaper up again. Just grab the corner. Just move everywhere. So to go with the grain for the soapstone, you can just sand it from any angle. Should be good. Really seeing the color of that stone coming through. Really starting to smooth up, really beautiful texture on that. Pretty amazing with just a few stages of sandpaper we'll do with a softer rock like soapstone. Try to be thorough. Try to stay focused for sandpaper number 3. Corners are really tough. You know what? I think I'm happy with that. All right, all 3 sandpapers are finished. The natural colors coming through. I really like it. I'm really happy with that. I'm going to go rinse this off in clean water to get this dusty water off of it. Let this dry completely before I add the finishing oil to this carving. Now that the turtle is dry, we can use the finishing oil that is included in the kits. I like to start with the bottom of my carving first. So my paper towel is down there just to protect the surface that I'm working on. Just gonna put that in there and just start being pretty liberal with that, spreading that oil around. This should bring out that natural color as well that you would have seen in that 3rd sandpaper. We're just trying to be as even as we can all the way around the carving, trying to get into every nook and cranny. Those grooves are going to be some of the harder spots to get into, but just keep working that Q-tip around. It should be pretty good. Once I've gotten a good coat on the bottom of my carving, I'm just going to grab it, turn it around, and finish with the top. Depending on what finish you're putting on there, with the oil or the wax, you really want to make sure you have a nice clean dry surface before you do either one of those. Making sure for my groove patterns, I'm gonna do my best to get that oil in there. For anybody who's already done a soapstone turtle carving, we'd love to see some of the patterns and designs you put on those shells, or just some of the natural colors that you found in that stone while you were working with it. It's always great to see other people's works. It's done. Just turning that carving around, looking for any gray spots that you might have missed. You can hide pretty well, so just make sure you're moving that carving around, checking it from all different angles. That's why I like to start at the bottom first, so I can make sure I've got a good liberal coat on the bottom, and then when I flip it over, I just have to make sure that I don't see any more gray spots. And it should have a pretty good coat all over it. I think I got it all. Looks pretty good. I'm going to let this sit for at least a couple hours before I wipe off any excess oil on this carving. And I'm going to call that done. All right, thanks for joining me with the sea turtle tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. So this would apply for the medium and the large sea turtles that we provide in our kits. If you would like to know more about some of the things that we do, please like and subscribe. Check out our sites. Feel free to email us at rubbleroadsoapstone@gmail.com. My name is David Swinowski. Thank you very much for joining me.